welcome you all here. My name is Melanie Lamb. I'm currently serving as a member at large on the Keep Grapevine Beautiful board. And I do want to thank you for attending tonight. We've had a great deal of support this year for all of our Eco Talks, and we look forward to our final Eco Talk for the year tonight. We're welcoming the DFW Airport Environmental Affairs Department, and I'd like to introduce Sarah Zymek. Are we starting with you? Or
not quite. I'll get up and introduce ourselves.
Okay, great. Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you.
Okay. You want to all get it?
Sure.
Sorry.
Okay, well, hello, I'm Sandy Lancaster. I'm Assistant Vice President of our Environmental Affairs at DFW Airport. We're super excited to be here tonight. Short little background on me, I've been at DFW for about 32 years, officially 25. When I was 14, I went up in an airplane for the first time and got hooked on aviation, and I've been in it ever since. But migrated into environmental, where I did a lot of work with environmental planning and with noise. And so that's where I'll finish my career, I'm sure, at some point in time.
Hi, I'm James Wood. I'm a Sustainability Project Manager with Environmental Affairs. My background is in transportation policy and planning. I got a doctorate in that and taught that for a while as an urban planning professor, but then came to work at DFW. So I've been here about 2 years. I'm newer to the sustainability field, but I come from finance and policy background, so I'm able to pull in some of that knowledge.
Good evening, I'm Lakin Baker. I'm a sustainability analyst at DFW Airport. My background is primarily environmental consulting, but I've been with the airport for about 3 years now on the sustainability team.
And good evening, everyone. I'm Sarah Zymek, the Sustainability Program Manager at DFW, which means I oversee the team that develops the strategy and initiatives for our sustainability program. And I have been at the airport about 6.5 years. I worked as an environmental scientist previously and really focused especially on wetland science and plant biodiversity. But now I work on everything from energy to waste as well. So you'll hear a little bit from Sandy first about airport development, probably some of the activities you've heard in the news, and then our sustainability team will tell you a little bit more about some specific initiatives around emissions reductions and waste.
Awesome. Okay. All right. Well, here's our agenda. So Sarah kind of already went through it, but you can kind of see the more granular topics that we're going to talk about. The airport just kicked off its largest capital program ever. It's amazing, crazy. So we apologize in advance for the inconvenience that's necessary when you grow. But I want to talk about that and then talk about the environmental process we went through before we were able to start that, and then into our sustainability management plan, carbon neutrality, and our net zero trajectory. So hopefully you can see that okay.
Do you mind using that mic?
Sure, okay. All right, I don't stand still very well, but I'll do my best.
You can either hold it or you can put it near where you're at.
Okay, all right.
Okay, thank you so
We'll
much.
try being stationary, not too good at being stationary. So this is kind of our DFW by the numbers slide. To me, it's just fascinating, all of this amazing information, but basically our airport has grown to be the busiest and most connected airport literally in the world. You could get to any major metropolitan area within 4 hours from DFW.
Just a little bit closer. Yeah, if you don't mind, I'm so sorry. Okay, now go ahead, I'm so sorry.
See? Sitting on something. All right. If I walk around with them, is it cool? Is that better?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay. Great. All right. So I'm going to hit this kind of quickly. This is actually on our website, so you can find these fun facts. But you can see that we're a very busy airport. This is some interesting statistics about our airport. We're one of the few airports in the world that have 7 runways, but we just turned 50 years old. And so as you can imagine, just like city streets and utilities kind of wear out over time, part of what we're dealing with is aging infrastructure. So we're building like crazy, but we're also trying to fix aging infrastructure. We've progressively been rebuilding runways. We've got 1 more to go. So this is a page out of a cool book that's online. It's a little digging to find it. But essentially, we signed a new airline use agreement that kind of commits what the airlines are gonna do, what DFW is gonna do, kind of like a contract. But we recognized in that the amount of passengers that we have, I think we had 82 million in 2023, which was a record. We thought, wow, that's amazing. But we're actually projected to be at 100 million passengers before the end of this decade. I think originally it said 2030, I think they're upping it to 2028 because we're just growing so fast, which is really cool coming out of COVID because, you know, a lot of airports really took a hit. DFW fared better than most, and now the growth is incredible. So we're gonna talk a little bit about this growth. Like I said, I don't stand still very well. So this is kind of a snapshot of what's going on just in our central terminal area. So I'm gonna kind of go counterclockwise. So up at the top, when we say International Parkway Modernization, you know, it's a spine road right in the middle of the airport. And it's always been a little counterintuitive because you come in and your exits are on the left. But you know, on most roads, you're looking for your exit on the right. And it's just been challenging, so we're actually redoing it and making right turns. So, imagine that while we're running our airport, trying to make this happen, but it's underway now, so look forward to that. That'll be super cool. Over on our west side, we're expanding cargo, so that's coming up. We're also modernizing our fire stations, so we have 7 fire stations on airport, 4 of which are actually servicing the airfield. We're gonna consolidate that into 2 fire stations, and so that'll make it a lot easier for our first responders. You've probably heard of Terminal F. So just south of Terminal D, we're gonna build Terminal F, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. That looks fuzzy to me, but I think it's my angle. We're building end-around taxiways. You can sort of see kind of a loop-de-doo right here, but it basically allows an aircraft to land and then go around the departure runway. So you don't have aircraft that land and then they have to wait and cross the departure runway. It's much, much safer. It actually also reduces emissions. Again, counterintuitive, but it's sort of like when you're driving down the highway, your car burns less emissions than when you're sitting in the drive-through line at Starbucks and just idling. Same with the aircraft. Our East-West Connector project down here on the south end is actually gonna connect Rental Car Road with Harwood. So that's a nice alternative when 183 gets backed up. So the piers, Terminal A and C piers, I'm gonna hit those both together. Terminal C renovation, we're gonna redo Terminal C. It's our oldest, ugly, kind of our oldest terminal. We're gonna make it super pretty. It's gonna be super cool. Fire station modernization, the electric central utility cut. So that's gonna replace our central utility plant essentially with electric power, so significant reduction in emissions. So these piers, essentially we're adding kind of a stinger, if you would, on terminals A and C. So it takes away some gates to add gates, so it's a net 9 new gates. And then we just completed rehabilitation of our primary departure runway on the east side, 17 right, 35 left. So I'm gonna hit a few of those a little more granular. This is kind of what the pier is gonna look like. So again, taking a few gates away to add a lot more. That's under construction right now. This is a video for showing you Terminal C. Has anybody been in the new gates in Terminal C, kind of at the high end? Yeah, look much different, don't they? So the new Terminal C is gonna look much like that. Our current Terminal C, again, built and opened in '74. It has 500 columns throughout the structure. We're gonna reduce that to 50. So that's gonna open it way up. We're gonna put baggage downstairs, which is kind of consistent with most airports, so then you'll open up a lot more room on the upper deck, and then the baggage handling is gonna be downstairs. So a lot more open and airy, it's gonna be great. And then our Terminal F is gonna look very similar to that, so. This is Terminal F. So this is kind of the timeline. Can't see it on there, so I'm gonna be mobile. So in 2024, we're starting on this construction. So it's not a lot that's really evident right now, but it's going like crazy. One cool thing about F and our peers is we're using modular construction. So we literally build them over here, and then when we're ready, we truck them onto the airfield and tuck them in where they go. So it saves a lot in cost, it's much more efficient, and it reduces emissions, so we like that. So we expect our electric central utility cut to open in 2025. Lots of construction going on. 2026, we expect the piers to be open then, and the east-west connector. And then 2027 and beyond is when we're going to open Terminal F. So lots going on at the airport. It's super exciting. So this is one of the things I wanted to tell you about. How do you find out more? If you're curious and you want to know, if you go to dfwairport.com/construction, then you come to this page, and then you can kind of navigate through. It's like, okay, I'm coming to the airport. This will tell you if there are roads closed, this garage is closed. It'll kind of help you navigate. And then each of these projects I talked about, there's on little tabs. You can actually pull up kind of a fun fact sheet on each of these projects. And so then you can understand a little bit more, well, what is the A pier? Oh, here you go, and it tells you all about it. So that's super cool. And there's some links that are here to the construction side, and then some press release type of media information that provides more information. So before we could start any of this construction, we had to go through an environmental process. Has anybody ever heard of NEPA? So NEPA is the National Environmental Policy Act. It applies really to any federal agency who's gonna build something. So Federal Highway is gonna build a road. Before they build that, they have to go through NEPA. Same for our airport. So what is NEPA? So NEPA is basically before we can do any project, so anything that's federally funded or that changes our airport layout plan, we go through this process. So NEPA is kind of an umbrella law to make sure that project is not going to create environmental impacts. And the goal is to avoid, and if you can't avoid, to minimize your effect, and if you've done everything you can to I can't say that word, then you mitigate. So here's some of the rules that come under NEPA. The ones that are in orange are the ones that tend to apply at DFW Airport. There's actually 21 environmental resource categories. Some things like coastal resources obviously don't apply, but a lot of these other ones do. And so we have to actually generate a document, go through this process, and look at, we're comparing what if I build versus what if I do nothing. So you can kind of understand and benchmark what those effects are. So we went through that. It took about 2.5 years, and that was partially because things were evolving. So one of our big categories that we had to look at was air quality. So our region didn't get a good grade on air quality, and unfortunately we didn't study well because our air quality has been declining a little bit. So NEPA has to look at the direct emissions from construction for that project, and then the indirect emissions. For example, we're building piers and adding additional gates. That's bringing new aircraft in. So we actually have to count the emissions that those operations would bring to our airport. And I said our region is kind of going down, unfortunately. So that sets certain thresholds as to what is kind of the benchmark for an impact. So back in 2012, we were moderate non-attainment for, and this is for ozone. So then our threshold was 100 tons per year of those ozone precursors, so the nitrous oxides and the volatile organic compounds. But then it went down in 2019 to 50, it went down to 25 in 2022. So like each time it's getting halved. So this is for the whole region. So this is not, oh, just DFW, this is all the roads, all the industry, everything in 10 counties, I believe. There. So there's monitors around that monitor that air quality, but that's kind of sets where we are in terms of meeting standards that EPA puts out. So when we go through a process with evaluating a project, this is our threshold. So if we exceed that threshold, it puts us into another process where we essentially have to work with the state to make sure that our project can conform to the state implementation plan. So in this case, we added a net 31 new gates. We're operating about 6.5 turns per day. So the resultant emissions was just under 1,000 tons per year, and that's by the year 2036. That's when everything's gonna be built, and we've maximized the operations that that project generated. So we work well with our state agency, Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, to ensure that our project could conform to that plan. So that was kind of a biggie. The other biggie is noise. So this is kind of just a quick picture of what flight patterns look like. Essentially, aircraft take off and land into the wind. So we're either landing from north to south when the winds are south, or we're taking off to the north. So for Grapevine, you probably oftentimes see aircraft headed south, because south flow is our predominant flow. But I think yesterday we were in north flow, I think we're back to south flow today. But so then sometimes you might see aircraft taking off to the north, and that we're in that flow about 30% of the year. And then every now and then we have odd patterns due to winds and weather. But so for this project, we had to look at, you know, if these are our flight patterns and how runways are used, how will this project affect that? In this case, so we had to look at the cumulative noise of that effect. And so a noise impact is defined, so if you think of lines of equal noise exposure, we call them contours, then within certain thresholds of noise, then your change is limited. For example, in 65 DNL, which is considered significant noise, if you have a 1.5 change, then that's considered an impact. So in this case, there wasn't really a lot of change. We didn't have really any impacts, and I know this is hard to see, but this is comparing the do nothing alternative, no action, versus the proposed action. So the greenish line compared to the purple line being the action. So really we weren't changing how we use runways, we're just adding a few more flights. So the only place we had a change really was in Irving. So kind of right here, there's some apartments. So the noise contour grew a little bit to where it was over compatible land use, and the project moved it slightly into residential. But it was at a low enough level that it wasn't an impact. And so anyway, we were aware of that, but that's kind of a process we have to go through. And then ultimately, FAA has to approve, Federal Aviation Administration has to approve our project through NEPA before we can break ground on any construction. So this took a while. It's a very robust program, but it's good that we do that, because that makes us think differently, and we think, well, how can we build this in an environmentally friendly and sustainable manner? So that's a good segue over to our sustainability management plan, and I'll turn it over to Sarah.
Thank you, Sandy. So now that we've talked a lot about the exciting and upcoming projects at DFW, we're going to talk a little bit more in detail about our sustainability management plan and how we developed that. And then Lakin and James are going to give you more insight into some of the ongoing initiatives. And when we think about sustainability at the airport, we think about the traditional definition of sustainable development, which is development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. So when we're building new terminals, when we're building new facilities, when we're rehabilitating existing facilities, we're thinking about our current needs, yes, but we're also thinking about the future generations of communities around the airport, future airport employees, and all of our neighbor cities. And back in 2020, we started the process of updating our sustainability management plan. And it's a long plan, which will be posted on our website soon. I believe it's really just the old version on our website. But it's a long plan that details all of the initiatives for DFW Airport to achieve sustainable development over the next couple of decades. And when we began updating the plan and thinking about new focus areas for the next 20 years, we looked to the United Nations 17 Sustainable Development Goals, which detail a number of environmental, social, and economic strategies for sustainable development. And the idea is that if you just think about the environment and you don't focus on people, or you don't focus on the business or the economic side, you're not gonna be successful. You have to think about people, you have to think about the planet, and you have to think about economic viability as well. So we looked and drew inspiration from those 17 sustainable development goals that the UN has, and we developed 6 focus areas for ourselves. And we call those focus areas our sustainability North Stars. And so they include climate action, which Lakin is going to talk more about, and that encompasses our goal to achieve net zero carbon emissions by 2030. And you may wonder, why is an airport in Texas talking about climate action? And there's a couple of reasons. First of all, it makes business sense. So if you look back several years to 2006, we were paying about $30 million per year for energy costs. And that includes electricity, includes all the different fuels we use, gasoline, diesel, fuels for fire training activities at the airport. And since then, we've cut our energy costs almost in half. And that has been while we switched to increasing our supply of renewable energy. So we switched to renewables, we've saved on our energy costs, and we've also helped improve local air quality, like Sandy mentioned, is a big focus for our region. The next focus area for us is energy performance. So we don't just want clean energy, but we want to make sure we have a resilient source. Many of you probably have been aware of the Texas grid and some of the struggles we face with outages and brownouts. So we want to make sure that the airport, as a piece of critical infrastructure for our region, has a resilient supply of energy. And that means looking at technologies like battery storage or even some on-site solar generation to help reduce stress on the grid during periods of peak demand. We're also thinking about water and biodiversity. The airport has a campus of over 17,000 acres, which is larger than Manhattan. So we have quite a bit of green space. 23% of our campus is actually covered in urban forest. So we have a goal to be water and nature positive, which means as we look forward to the future, we're gonna identify some of the most biodiverse areas of our land that we can set aside and preserve and restore, and think about situating some of our development on areas that are less biodiverse. We also have a focus on health, safety, and wellness, and this is really coming back to the focus not just on the environment, but on people. So we want to make sure our employees, our customers, and our communities are healthy. And that includes some newer initiatives like focusing on indoor environmental quality, making sure the air we breathe inside our buildings is good for employee and passenger health. And then finally, we have a focus on both equity and circular economy. Equity, again, that's another focus on a positive impact on employees, on our customers, on our communities, and making sure that the economic benefits of the airport are spread across multiple diverse suppliers. And then circular economy is thinking about zero waste by 2040, which I'm gonna let James really dive into the details of what zero waste means for DFW Airport. And so our vision is that over the next 2 decades, we're gonna create a resilient and healthy, sustainable airport ecosystem. And we call it an ecosystem because we realize that all of the different pieces of it are interconnected. Our people, our operations, our communities, our natural environment, they're all interconnected. And so I will turn it over to Lakin to talk a little bit about our climate action efforts.
Thanks, Sarah. So yes, I'll just touch quickly on some of the climate action initiatives. First and foremost, DFW Airport is a carbon neutral airport. We were the first to achieve this in North America, and we're the largest carbon neutral airport in the world. We're certified through the Airport Carbon Accreditation Program. They set the global standard for carbon management best practices globally for airports. We achieved level 4+ transition in September of 2020, and some of the initiatives that we do to maintain that, or I guess first of all, what exactly is carbon neutrality? So basically what that means is we're trying to reduce our emission sources as much as possible from what we call scope 1 and 2 emissions. So when we talk about scope 1 and 2, we're talking about things that DFW Airport has direct control over, that being facility heating, our vehicle fleet, de-icing activities, our fire training activities at our Fire Training Research Center, and any refrigerant losses from our E-cup, or cup, rather. Scope 2 has to do with our indirect emissions associated with purchased electricity. We also have something called Scope 3. This is basically everything not including Scope 1 and 2. So the biggest ones being our aircraft emissions, airline and tenant GSE activities, tenant facility heating and electricity, any third-party fire training or de-icing activity, and transportation to and from the airport. Looking at an overall carbon footprint as of 2023, you can see that the biggest chunk is taken up by our aircraft and tenant operations. And then when we talk about Scope 1 and 2, that's actually just the little, I don't know if you can see it, but the little orange sliver just in that pie graph. So that's our ones, Scope 1 and 2. If we break that down a little bit more, it breaks out into facility heating being our largest contributor, and then it goes to our vehicle fleet, and then our refrigerant losses from our cup. So a couple of the things that we've implemented to help reduce these emissions now and up until our net zero by 2030 target have been the switch to 100% renewable electricity from Texas wind farms. We also do a little bit of self-generation on site from solar panels, as well as the transition to renewable natural gas for our fleet. So RNG is practically identical to fossil fuel natural gas. The only difference is it's sourced from renewable sources. In our case, it is made from the methane that's produced from local landfills. But yes, so that was carbon neutrality. So we also have a net zero by 2030 target, and that is 2 decades prior to the United Nations global target. So we began this journey around 2016. Right now we're currently sitting around 81% reduction from our 2010 baseline. The difference between carbon neutrality and net zero is that net zero requires a minimum reduction of 90%. And then that residual 10% will be addressed via carbon removal technologies, as well as offsetting. As Sandy mentioned, I guess the cornerstone project of this initiative has been the construction of our electric central utility plant. We broke ground on this project in 2023, and the meaning of, or the purpose of it is to transition the primary energy source for the terminal heating from natural gas boilers to electric powered boilers, all powered by renewable electricity. This will significantly reduce the natural gas usage up to around 8% and those associated emissions with it. As Sandy mentioned, we are a 50-year-old airport, so the E-cup will also just provide additional operational flexibility and resilience. Our current cup has reached capacity, so the new E-cup will allow us to meet our current demand as well as expand sustainability. Associated with this, as I mentioned earlier, refrigerant loss from our current cup is a big contributor to our emissions. So along with transitioning all of our boilers over to electricity, we're also transitioning the refrigerants used in our chillers to a more globally friendly, I guess it has a lower global warming potential than the refrigerants currently used in the E-cup, or in the cup chillers, by about 56% less. And early results have also shown that this will also just improve the overall efficiency of our chillers. And now I'll pass it over to James.
Thank you, Becky. So, yeah, I'm here to help close it out with talking about trash. And, or we like to think of it more in terms of what we call circular economy, which is euphemistic. But essentially, it means reducing our waste stream, which of course we've been doing for quite a while. Many of you do in your own homes with recycling, composting. But to go beyond that, to think about the full life cycle of something you buy. Not just when you purchase it and use it, but where it goes after you're done with it. Maybe you reuse it, you give it to a friend, or you find a new purpose for it. And sometimes you can find something that was meant to be repurposed or taken apart after you were done with it and put into something more useful. So there's a whole stream of usefulness to an item before you even use it, and then after you're done with it. So we've started to think about that at the airport on a broader scale. To start with, the EPA generated this waste management hierarchy. It's like the food pyramid, but don't eat it. It starts with, obviously, basically these are the most preferred, most impactful things you can do as individuals, as employers, to help solve the waste crisis. Number one, most important, source reduction and reuse. Simply buying less and reusing what you have, being a little bit less disposable with your activities. And I'll show some examples of how we do that. That is a huge contributor right there. Also, recycling and composting where it's available. I know every different community in North Texas has different recycling standards. What do you put in the bin? What can you not put in the bin? But we're working on that with our clients and our customers as well. And composting. We're very excited about our composting program at the airport, and I'll talk a bit about that. Even further, we're moving into energy recovery. We're finding ways to extract energy from our garbage and put it to good use. So essentially, in this arrow here kind of helps to illustrate that you can help to circle back on lessons. As you move along the pyramid, as your ideas mature, it becomes, at the bottom they say it's least preferred. That's where you don't want to end up, is where your garbage has been produced and then you have to look for a place to put it. But as you move along these steps, you can circle back along the way with lessons you've learned. So recycling is often what people think of most easily when they think of waste and circular economy. It is a fundamental way to reduce the amount of garbage you produce. At the airport, we do waste audits once or twice a year. We just sort of pull a random dumpster and we spend a day digging through it and sorting it. And we make our interns do it. It's very fun. And we find a couple of prizes that we bring back and give to Sandy, like a teddy bear or people's artwork. People throw away the strangest things. But that gives us an idea. We're able to count, even amongst our garbage, what could have been recycled. And what we find is a staggering percentage could have been recycled. I mean, a lot of it is. We do have recycling cans next to every trash can, and we thank our customers for doing that, but we find well over half of a lot of our garbage is made up of something that could be recycled. Most commonly plastic, paper, cardboard, metal. Those are the items we mainly recycle at DFW. We don't typically recycle glass in our customer bins because glass isn't often sold at an airport for safety reasons, but we have been doing a glass pilot for a while. I think we just concluded it, or is it still? Yeah, just concluded it. We wanted to learn some lessons on how much glass is generated at the airport and then what can we do with it. So this is mostly, as you see, it's not from a Guns N' Roses concert. It's mostly from our airport lounges, bars, that sort of thing, beer bottles, wine bottles. So we not only collected it and weighed it to see how much glass is out there, but we worked with the community to find a business that could take it off our hands and put it to good use. It goes to a fiberglass company that makes fibers for insulation. They can also make carpet, they can make windows out of it. It's a small project that started to scratch the surface of a larger problem. Glass is also quite heavy. So as a recyclable item, it's pretty interesting. Every year, the airport has a big top-line goal that the executive leadership sets for the whole airport, and our team gets to help with it, to divert more and more waste year over year away from landfill, to find a new use for it, whether it's recycling or auctioning it so someone else can use it, or just buying less. And last year, it was about 16% of our total waste stream, which is not as high as we wish, but it was higher than the year before. This year, I want to say close to 20. So we made an improvement over the past year, and a lot of that has to do with educating our workforce and helping our customers to make it easy to recycle, and also helping to find new life for things. Moving into a new category, going a step beyond recycling, one of those waste to energy concepts. This is something we're working on, an anaerobic digester, which essentially helps to turn organic waste, whether that's food scraps, grass clippings, beer and wine, anything you might have, essentially that could be turned into compost in the home, can instead be accelerated through a chemical process to make a couple of different items. The main thing it makes is what we call digestate. That's physical, compost. It's nutrient-rich soil. And it also generates a biogas product, mainly methane, but also CO2. And you can do different things with those materials. You can get creative with your approach. You could donate the compost to the community. You could use it in landscaping. This particular example, it's in, I think, the state of Maine. They use theirs, they have a cogeneration plant. So the gas it produces is then burned as clean biogas to provide electricity for the plant. So it powers itself on garbage. We like this because organic waste, kitchen scraps, food scraps, and grass clippings, not so much. We leave those on the ground, as you should. But our kitchen waste from all those restaurants and flight kitchens, it generates a considerable slice of the pie for us. It's about a third of our garbage, sometimes more. And we have to truck that up to a landfill. We have to pay a landfill to take it off our hands. We have to pay for the trucks and the drivers and the expense. And also it does contribute to climate change. It contributes to landfills filling up faster than they should. So the airport has a direct financial incentive as well as an environmental incentive to find a new home for all that food waste. And we can't as easily ask all of our customers to eat fewer things in the terminals. So we instead look for concepts like this to give it a new life, to turn it into something that can be useful to the community, to the airport. We haven't quite decided what format it's going to take yet. We're still looking at the options, but it's a way to turn organic waste into energy. Construction waste diversion. Sandy told you about all of our construction. It's nonstop at the airport, but we promise it'll be better when it's all done. We're really proud of our waste diversion of construction waste. It generates a lot of very heavy waste, concrete, steel, glass. We recycle, usually on site or within the region, 94% of that waste. It often doesn't even leave the property. When we resurface a runway, it's a lot of concrete. But concrete, luckily, is easily recyclable. You just smash it up and you can make brand new concrete, which we've done. A lot of our parking lots are repaved with old runway concrete. And same with the metal. It's a lot of steel members. We, find someone who can take that off our hands and give it a new life in metal recycling. It's a 94% diversion. It still has some room to grow. We're always looking for new places to send carpets and windows and furnishings, anything related to construction that we can give a new life. We're happy to do so. One of our smaller new projects, but one that's a little exciting for us, you may have seen these water bottle filling stations, which are kind of all the rage. There's probably a few in this building. Up in the corner, they have a digital readout that tells you how many bottles you have saved or prevented from being used by using a reusable bottle. And we've had these stations throughout the terminals for a few years, but we've started to count up that number and to see in the course of a quarter or a year how many bottles each station serves, or saves rather. And then we pulled a number from the plastics industry about how much one of those empty bottles weighs. Doesn't weigh much, an ounce or two, but the number of bottles we save at the airport in a year, the number of times these things are used, we estimate, we're just starting to count, but the industry estimates say that the number of fountains we have, and as busy as DFW Airport is, by the end of the year, we'll have saved roughly 12 to 15 tons of plastic. And that's a lot of water bottles. Now we don't know that for sure, we just started counting, but These are very popular at DFW, water bottle filling stations. And it's clean, filtered water, perfectly safe to drink. It's an example of that circling back concept that, we've had this technology for a while, but we have a fresh idea to go back and look for a new way to document our recycling and document responsible choices people make. And we're very happy our customers support it as well. They really seem to like that water. Adaptive reuse is something else that I think we're especially proud of on our team. These are creative things that our group is doing on their own to help keep something away from a landfill, to give it a new life. Over on the left, these are concrete parking blocks. Judging from the shape of them, the size of them, some of them were original from 1974, and they've been sitting, at some point over the years, their parking garage was remodeled. We just sort of set these off for storage outside in the elements. Honestly, we're not even sure how long they sat there, but we eventually found, we put them up for auction, but we found a school district in North Texas that was willing to take them all off our hands for a small fee. And they came in and picked them up. It took them more than a week to take them all away. It was a few thousand parking blocks. Each one weighed about 200 pounds. But this saved the school district a great deal of money because they were able to refill, I think it was a couple of stadium parking lots and school district buildings. They were able to save a lot of concrete that didn't have to be purchased. And concrete is a very energy intensive thing to have to make. So if you can avoid that and save money, they might have bought all these things, the whole lot, for a few $100s. So that helps as well. That's tonnage that would have just sat out there. Concrete doesn't break down so easily, so we found a new home for it. We helped a local resource save some money. We're happy to do that. An example up here, this is a trash compactor assembly. I can't quite see, but the lighter portion up against the door, there's a small hatch and you throw garbage into it, you close the door, push a button, and it smushes the trash into the device. We have these throughout the property, the terminals, warehouses, wherever we can. But one of the interesting things we found, and that a team member of ours came up with, was over time, these things need replacing. They wear out, they get old, they get rusty. It's actually two separate parts. There's the compactor assembly, which is the light metal part, it's the machinery part, but this can be pulled away, can be hauled away. Over time, we found that these cans needed a new home, they needed a new purpose. It's a big empty metal box. On the front, it opens up a little bit on one side. It's kind of similar to a shipping container or a storage shed. So our waste supervisor, who is a former merchant seaman, really, really creative guy, he got a blowtorch and said, what if you made that into a shipping container storage box? Because we have clients on the property who say they have a construction site, they need a sturdy place to store their equipment at night and lock it up. Or we have construction projects that need an open top dumpster. And rather than renting or buying a storage shed for somebody, or renting or buying a whole new open top dumpster, we can just alter one of these things that we already own and save a lot of money, save a lot of time, and give a new life to something that otherwise just might sit like the concrete. And that just takes creativity and a blowtorch. You can get a lot done with those two things. And down here on the right, an example, this is a pallet of olives. DFW warehouses, all manner of products come through North Texas. Anything you could possibly buy or eat or sell, including olives. We know somebody in the region who does nothing but import olives for the whole region, for Whole Foods and Kroger and everybody. But occasionally they get a batch that's damaged or dented. Somehow they can't sell it to their wholesaler, their grocery stores, but they don't want to just throw it away. They can't send it back for money because it goes all the way over to Italy and Greece, apparently. So we spent some time with them. We used some of our resources in our department. We found a few soup kitchens and a food truck in Dallas a nonprofit food truck that could gladly take all these olives off our hands. I don't know what they did with them, but they ended up with a few tons of olives. And it is a good deed for the community, but it also helps the airport. It helps our waste stream and our water quality, because somebody might have just, dumped all this down a drain somewhere, or just left it outside and it would have blown away or done anything. So reducing the waste stream can also mean, helping the community, giving a few thousand people olives to eat. So we donated, by the way, in 2024, 17 tons of olives, and they also do tomato sauce. They had pallets of tomato sauce as well. Now the tomato sauce, they said it was pizza sauce in these big pouches the size of a pillowcase. They said if you take the pizza sauce and water it down about 2/3, it becomes tomato soup. The olives, I don't know. But they were happy to get them. They said people had all kinds of recipes. So, and the concrete, by the way, it looks like we were able to divert that weight 164 tons, all those parking blocks. So, to wrap up a little bit, as Sarah mentioned, we have this massive campus, over 17,000 acres. We're, by the way, as you can guess, right up about here. But as she said, about 1/4 of the property is forested. It used to be more than that. We would like it to stay as much as possible. We have our Trigg Lake, we have a full golf course, we have trails and creeks. There's even a waterfall somewhere in there, a natural waterfall. But we also have this need to balance the community's needs, and in some cases, the nation or even the world's needs of global commerce. So we are adding terminals, we are adding new cargo developments. One of Sandy's projects is a big warehouse just for flowers. It's a customs inspection refrigerated station for flowers, because the demand is so great. It's fascinating. But we have this opportunity to be an ecological anchor for the region, to be not only a place where wild animals live, and they do live in here, quite a bit of birds and coyotes, armadillos, anything you might want to see in North Texas. It lives here because it's untouched. It can be safe in there. There won't be cars and development. But we get to do that, but we also get to help our host communities, our neighbors. We get to come and have talks like this and share the lessons we've learned about composting and waste and emissions reduction. And so we really get to help our neighbors meet their needs for their environmental needs or their socioeconomic growth as well, without sacrificing unduly our natural environment. So we're very proud of the work we do. We're very proud to see such a full turnout. The room is full. Thank you so much for coming. And we're happy to take your questions and talk more about all the work we're doing at DFW.
I have sort of an unrelated question. Where is the weather station at the airport? The one that's, the official weather station.
The official weather station, well, so we have a couple weather stations on the airport. There's one on the east side and one on the west side. They sit in the airfield area. It's called an ASOS station. I forgot what the acronym stands for, but we have that. We also, who would have thought, let's see, there's actually part down here, 360 and 183, that's airport property. So the FAA has what's called their air route traffic control center on that property, and that's for all the en route traffic. So, when you take off out of here, you're in the terminal airspace and you're handed off to en route to get to where you're going. There's actually a NASA research station there as well. So, we do have weather capability, but a lot of times when you hear, the main radars and that type of thing, there's a couple of different ones in the region, but if they say, well, we got 2 tons of an inch of rain at DFW Airport, it's usually from those ASOS stations. It's a good question. Yes, sir.
When you talk about all these sustainability goals and you use the term the airport, does that include all your vendors, all the rest of everything that's in the airport, or just airport operations?
It's a little bit of both. It's mainly us as DFW Airport, the airport itself, but we do work very closely with our vendors, with our airline partners. They all have their own sustainability plans, and we look for as many ways to overlap and join forces wherever we can. So the airlines each have their own plans to decarbonize and to reduce emissions. The major restaurant chains, they've been very good partners with us on recycling and composting. So most of the work we do is just for the airport, but we do work very closely with our business partners, and they're on board with just about all of it, more or less, well, it depends. Yes, sir.
Every once in a while, frequently, the airport does what I call, they crash an airplane, and for the fire training people, and there's a huge cloud of black smoke that goes up into the sky. That can't be very good for us. What is the black smoke, and why can you do so many of them? Is there an EPA exclusion for this, for training?
So we actually have, on airport, our fire training research center, we train, firefighters all across the world, literally. They come here to learn, and then we have, part of the FAA regulations is you have to simulate a fire, and then they have to go in and put it out. The good news is, we use a propane-based fuel, so they don't use, typical fuels. They use propane, and so it's a clean burning fuel. It looks, like you said, it looks kind of scary because it's very dark. But we work with TCEQ, we report to them each year how much fire training we're gonna do. But we also put on our website, it was really funny side story. We wanted to put on our website, if somebody saw smoke at the airport, it's like, well, you might go to DFW Airport. It's like, oh my gosh, just an airplane crashed. What happened? And it's like, so we said, let's put black smoke on the website. And everybody's like, no, you can't do that. But trying to get the word out to the community that it's fire training, it's very controlled, and it's propane-based fuel. So it's a super cool thing.
Another question. The central energy plant at one time used to have a huge chilled water storage tank. Is that still there? And that can't be any use anymore because there's no time of day usage for the chilled water.
It is there, and when you were first talking about it, I thought you were gonna say it had a huge dinosaur skeleton, which it did.
It used to.
By the way, the thermal energy storage tank is still there, and it is in use. So on a summer day when we have peak demand on our grid, I guess first of all, the way we cool our terminals is that we circulate supercooled water through the central terminal area. And we chill that water and cool it down at night when there's less demand on the grid and energy is cheaper. So if you're in our central utility plant on a summer day, say like 2 p.m., all the big chillers will be running, and then all of a sudden you'll hear them turn off. And that's when we've basically gone off the grid and we're circulating water from that tank through our terminals. So it actually drops the electric demand from the central plant from 18 megawatts down to 3 megawatts. So it really reduces our electricity use at the hottest part of the day. And the new electric central utility plant will help on those as well.
It's a giant thermos, isn't it?
Pretty much it.
I've got a question kind of related to that. Have you ever looked at geothermal for the airport? Is that an option? I mean, it's pricey.
Actually, our environmental affairs building is a geothermal building, so I think it's the first on the airport. Are we looking at more, Sarah, or it's?
I think for 1 or 2 facilities they looked at it, but it wasn't the.
Okay.
I believe it was considered for another 1 or 2 newer facilities, but it wasn't the most economically viable option for heating and cooling. We are looking at electric heat pump chillers more often for building heating.
One other observation, just a quick one on the water bottle thing. So, personal observation, there's not enough of those fillers in the airport, by far. You're shortchanging yourself on the savings on the bottles, when you said 12 to 15 tons. It's not just the plastic. It's the diesel to put the water in the truck to drive it to the airport. You could get about 45,000 bottles in a full truckload. So you guys, you're taking those trucks off the road too, and that's as much of an impact as the plastic piece.
And we did initially track that, because that is exactly right, the weight of the bottle from where it's made to where it gets to the customer. But the tricky thing is, we have to account for all of this to be audited at the end of the year, and we have to sort of show receipts. And the problem is, our water bottles are sourced from all over the region, and we don't always know exactly where it's coming from, and the auditors will want to know precisely where the bottles come from. But we do track that second number informally, but we can only report the plastic bottle. But yes, that is a very good point, because the full life cycle of a bottle includes a lot more weight, a lot more travel. And yes, those figures, we keep them, we just can't always report them with everything else. But yes, very good point, thank you.
So, one other question is I'm on the fuel thing. As somebody who is a major supplier to tenants in the airport, are there any future restrictions in mind or whatever on the vehicles we use to deliver? So our tractor trailer rigs. Would you say, because I know there's some places that have said, well, if you're gonna bring it on property, it needs to be either CNG or RNG, whatever it is, electric, something along those lines.
We have a few contracts, like for example, our contract for waste hauling, that have clean vehicle requirements like CNG. But as far as supplies to the vendors, that probably wouldn't be a contract with the airport itself, it would be with the concessionaire. So what they choose to implement is up to them. However, I guess I'll add in there that when we required vendors like our waste hauler to use clean fuels, we actually open up our CNG stations on the airport to the public. So it's not just airport fleet vehicles that fill up there with the CNG or actually renewable natural gas, it's public vehicles as well. And our catering, one of the major catering kitchens, LSG Sky Chefs, utilizes CNG trucks for their operations that fuel up there.
So back to the fire training, I've often wondered, do they use that fire retardant foam, which is bad for groundwater, when they do those exercises?
So, it's an interesting question. So, y'all probably heard about the firefighting foam, and it contains what they call the forever chemicals. And the challenge that the airports had for a long time is, while that was being recognized, at the same time, it's still the best firefighting foam. And the FAA was requiring airports to use what's called AFFF, even though we knew it had the forever chemicals in it. So they've come up with what we call fluorine-free foams, or F3 foams. We just invested in a bunch of new fire apparatus. These are hugely expensive, and we wanted to be mindful of our net zero goals, but also mindful of transitioning away from the AFFF, especially now that we had a fluorine-free alternative. So we spent $27 million and have these firefighting apparatus that we're required to have, but they're hybrid. And the goal is, when they come in, they will never be used but anything except the fluorine-free foam. And then as we retire out the old apparatus, then eventually we're getting rid of all of our AFFF. The great thing was that when this first came out, it's like, well, what do you do with the old vehicle? I mean, how many times do you rinse it before you say it's clean? And there was no standard, and then every time you rinse it, that rinsate has to be properly disposed of. But finally rules came out, but when we bought this fire apparatus, we made a deal with the manufacturer, and he said, oh yeah, I'll take those old equipment. So they took our old vehicles, and we got a rebate, which reduced our $27 million cost. Anyway, it's super cool. We're the first airport to do that, so we like it. We like
I'm glad
it.
you're thinking about it.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
In the same vein, what about the de-icing fluid?
So the de-icing fluid is still, we've switched off from, we used to use ethylene glycol, or I say we, it's actually the airlines. Some used ethylene and some used propylene. And propylene is cleaner, but we're now all propylene. And then when we de-ice aircraft, we have specific spots that aircraft can de-ice. Not only the aircraft there, but it has to be in the proper location. So we have nose wheel markers. So if I'm a wide body, there's a specific place I have to go and I put the nose wheel marking on that mark, and then I know that aircraft is in that catchment. So as they spray that fluid on those aircraft to de-ice and anti-ice, we have a capture system. And so that all goes into this capture system. One of the challenges that we have is, well, this is good and bad. We don't get a lot of winter precip, but we get a lot of cold days where there's frost. So they still need to de-ice the aircraft. So one of the things that we started doing is we bought glycol recovery vehicles. So after they've de-iced the aircraft, we go in, it's like a big street sweeper, but it's specifically made to sweep up that fluid. And then we put it in a tote separate from our glycol collection system, because frankly, it's pretty strong. It's a high concentration of the glycol fluids. And so that way we're able to dispose of that separately and keeping it out of our glycol system. The reason that's important is what we do with that glycol is, ideally it's diluted to some extent because that reduces that concentration. And then we work with the Trinity River Authority to kind of trickle it out, send it to them. They're very strict about the concentration, so if it's too hot, it has to sit in ponds until we can actually dispose of it. So, but we've got a good system there to be able to dispose of it. And then a lot of people say, well, why don't you recycle it? We're actually looking at that option. We can't predict how much fluid we're gonna have each year. It seems like every year our winters are mild, which, not complaining. I'm from Missouri, but I don't like the cold. But also when we have less precip, that makes it a little easier. If you think about an aircraft out there de-icing in the rain or in the sleet and snow, you're collecting not only the icing chemicals, but then all that fluid, so it can impact our capacity. That was kind of a long answer to your question.
I thought that pond on the south side was for that, is that true?
Well, Trig Lake, so that's actually, that's the waters of the US, and we're very careful about sampling and making sure that our spent aircraft de-icing fluids are not getting into our stormwater system. When that gets into the water system, it depletes the oxygen, which kills the aquatic life. That's bad. So we monitor that very carefully. We actually do have ponds. We have a central utility plant. It's right there. And then we have ponds there that we can store the spent aircraft de-icing fluid. Anything else y'all want to add?
I learned to drive one of the glycol trucks, and it's very fun. You have to just drive along 4 miles an hour, pulling up all the liquid on the ground.